I've always asked people to give me ideas for these commentaries, so today let's look at some of the states that stayed open during this pandemic, and as a result, don't have quite the flu problems that the communist states, Democrat states, that did shut down under the guise of saving lives. We never really put any effort into saving lives until now, since they politicized this virus, because if we did really want to save lives, I guess we would have done something about the issues like the huge numbers of black-on-black murders, like in Chicago, not to mention unborn babies. What did they say when this happened, but the coronavirus targeted kids? What did the Obama administration say?
We can't just say stop everything.
Oh, that's right. We pick and choose depending on who's president. Let's hear from someone I used to be a fan of. The crowned king of libtards, the prince of projection, the duke of double standards, Bill Maher.
And finally, new rule, don't spin me when it comes to my health. Over the past year, the COVID pandemic has prompted the medical establishment, the media, and the government,
primarily one of the two major parties,
to take a scared straight approach to getting the public to comply with their recommendations. Well, I'm from a different school. Give it to me straight, Doc.
You said quite the opposite during the previous administration. That's weird.
Because in the long run, that always works better than you can't handle the truth.
I don't know. You saw what happened when we minimized this problem. Don't you remember when people were hoarding toilet paper and getting in fights in grocery stores? That was self-induced panic.
I get it. Doctors tell people lies because they don't trust you to finish the antibiotics. And media? Well, I think we all know if it bleeds, it leads. The more they can get you to stay inside and watch their panic porn, the higher the ratings.
The more CNN constantly Russia this, Russia that.
Because it's ratings. Because it's ratings? Our ratings are incredible right now.
Researchers at Dartmouth built a database recently monitoring the COVID coverage of the major news outlets. The U.S. national media reported almost 90% bad news.
A study finding mainstream media coverage of President Trump was 90% negative.
6 corporations controlled 90% of the media.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Even as things were getting better, the reporting remained negative.
And we're back with the governor of South Dakota.
I'd like to respond to something that you said. You indicated that I ignored medical advice. I didn't listen to my health experts, and I most certainly did. In South Dakota, we took this virus very seriously. What I did, though, was tell my people the truth. I gave them personal responsibility over decisions for their family's public health.
Oh my gosh, I know. Personal responsibility. How dare she?
But also gave them the flexibility they needed to keep their businesses open, take care of their employees and their customers. So I really do believe that as this virus has spread throughout the country, that people needed that flexibility. And South Dakota's doing well. We've had some tragic situations, but I know that respecting them and my role and the authority that I have as governor has been incredibly helpful to get our state get through this challenging time. You know, South Dakota's infection rate peaked earlier than a lot of other places in the country, so we're definitely on the downward trend and peaked earlier than what you're seeing happen across the country as well. You can talk about masks, we can talk about mitigation measures, all of that. I want people to make those decisions for themselves, and we've seen the CDC change recommendations over and over and over again. In fact, we've seen them do it just based on political pressure.
It's weird because the people who said not to politicize this flu politicized the flu while blaming others for politicizing this flu, while ignoring that the communist Chinese government tried to hide this entire thing. Of course, it wasn't released intentionally as a form of biological warfare or political manipulation, because the media said so, because the swamp said so. We can believe them and the communist Chinese government. They wouldn't benefit from such things, and they also wouldn't put their citizens in harm's way.
When all of our sources for medical information have an agenda to spin us, you wind up with a badly misinformed population, including on the left.
Well, that's because a majority of the mainstream press are on the left. So it should make sense that most of the mainstream news is inaccurate. And when you do report factual news, you're called a Trumper, a conspiracy theorist, a member of QAnon, a Nazi. You get the picture.
Mainstream media coverage, 90% negative.
90% bad news.
They've inaccurately reported on the corona flu, conservatives, police, and so much more.
Center for Disease Control in the States, they seem to be communicating via email. So very strange. I spent a lot of time looking for this on the website, couldn't find it. And I think this email to CNN, I believe it was, is the only source of this information.
That's weird. Why would the CDC send certain information only to CNN?
CNN makes it appear as though we have 24 hours of unbiased news. That's not true.
Liberals, in a recent Gallup survey, Democrats did much worse than Republicans in getting the right answer to the fundamental question, what are the chances that someone who gets COVID will need to be hospitalized? The answer is between 1 and 5%. 41% of Democrats thought it was over 50%. Another 28% put the chances at 20 to 49. So almost 70% of Democrats are wildly off
in the head
on this key question.
On most questions.
And also have a greatly exaggerated view of the danger of COVID-2 and the mortality rate among children.
A misinformed left. That's a shocker.
All of which explains why today the states with the highest share of schools that are still closed are all blue states.
Our state peaked earlier than other states, than New York, than California. They certainly are seeing much higher infection rates, much higher hospitalization rates, and much higher deaths today than we are. And that's really how we've seen this virus spread across the country. What I'd like to know, Margaret, is are you asking Cuomo these questions? Are you talking to Newsom about these questions?
When both of those governors accept an invitation to come on this program, and I hope they do.
South Dakota went through our highest rate of infections and implications earlier. The rest of the country is dealing with it much higher numbers today.
You would think that since Washington was the first state to get it, we would be the first to peak and recover, not under the brilliant dictatorship of Jay Inslee.
Getting dumber.
We're joined now by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Governor, you've probably heard the president use the term Neanderthal. Comments?
Of course, Joe, it's not the type of word that a president should be using.
You forget the rules. The left can say anything.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
I have great relationships with them because there's an awful lot who are driving cabs.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money.
And you ain't black.
Conservatives, Republicans, and especially Trump can't say stuff.
And some, I assume, are good people.
But his administration has been releasing in South Texas immigrants who came across the border that they refused to test. It turned out there were more than 100 of them who had COVID. My point is this. The Biden administration has been releasing immigrants in South Texas that have been exposing Texans to COVID. Some of those people have been put on buses, taking that COVID to other states in the United States. The Biden administration must stop importing COVID into our country. That is a Neanderthal-type approach.
Shouldn't liberal media have to answer for, how did your audience wind up believing such a bunch of crap about COVID?
And conservatives and Trump and the environment and police and crime and just about everything. But remember, they don't have to answer for anything. Their kids and grandkids are the cancel culture.
You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press.
Some say it would help us get back to normal. Others say it's an invasion of privacy. A vaccine passport could be required for travel or even sporting events.
Opening the states up would get things back to normal. Morons.
A new report in The Atlantic says the media won't stop putting pictures of the beach on stories about COVID, even though it's looking increasingly like the beach is the best place to avoid it. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and vitamin D is the key to a robust immune system.
Wait a minute. Don't you remember they attacked Trump for even suggesting that?
Mr. President, is it dangerous for you to make people think they would be safe by going outside in the heat?
The new headline is Trump asks people to go outside. That's dangerous. Here we go. Same old group.
The same group that ran headlines that he suggested that we inject house cleaner.
I hope people enjoy the sun, and if it has an impact, that's great. I'm just hearing this, not really for the first time. I mean, there's been a rumor, that very nice rumor, that you go outside in the sun or you have heat and it does have an effect on other viruses. But now we get it from one of the great laboratories of the world.
Texas lifted its COVID restrictions recently, and their infection rates went down, in part because of people getting outside to let the sun and wind do their thing. To many liberals, that can't be right.
I know it can't be right because Trump suggested it a year ago. In the headlines, coronavirus doctor rejects Trump's heat and light idea at White House, which they didn't really do, but that's nothing new.
90% negative.
90% bad news. Because Texas and beach-loving Florida have Republican governors. But apparently the governor is also a voracious consumer of the scientific literature. And maybe that's why he protected his most vulnerable population, the elderly, way better than did the governor of New York. Those are just facts. I know it's irresponsible of me to say them.
Why start now? And on a side note, you notice the same people who were criticizing and vilifying the vaccine before the election are suddenly huge pro-vaccine advocates.
Governor Ron DeSantis from the very state of Florida, you have kept your state open.
We led. We went against the grain. We had a lot of opposition, particularly from the corporate media, but our kids are in school. Parents are happy with that. Our economy's growing. People are working. morning, and they were predicting economic doom, particularly for Florida, because we're tourism-based. And our tourism isn't backed by any stretch, and yet we're getting huge revenue into the state with no tax increases. We're going to have a budget surplus, and we're clicking on all cylinders. We're doing more on the vaccines for the senior citizens, but I would rather be in Florida than just about any other state right now.
The way Ainsley set that up is this $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package. Most of it is not related to coronavirus.
Oh, another shocker.
Instead, it is, in many cases, a blue state bailout.
Here's what I'm saying. I don't want politics mixed in with my medical decisions.
Kind of too late for that, isn't it? But you brainiacs that demand universal health care will get nothing but that.
If their side says COVID is nothing, our side has to say it's everything. If you lie to people, even for a very good cause, you lose their trust.
You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy.
A stunning statistic was reported. 78% of those hospitalized, ventilated, or dead from COVID have been overweight. It is the key piece of the puzzle, by far the most pertinent factor, but you dare not speak its name. Imagine how many lives could have been saved if there had been some national campaign with the urgency of the pandemic behind it.
Or Planned Parenthood.
If the media and the doctors had made a point to keep saying, but there's something you can do.
Notice he didn't add the current administration to that group.
But we'll never know, because they never did. Because the last thing you want to do is say something insensitive. We would literally rather die. Instead, we were told to lock down. Unfortunately, the killer was already in the house, and her name is Little Debbie.
We better reach out to cancel culture and have that changed, since it's exclusionary to all people named Debbie. Can this be a test run for things to come? How do you know the Chinese government didn't deliberately do this? Or is this just to get people's minds off the Epstein scandal involving many of the same people who say we should shut everything down? You notice that Epstein case kind of just went away. Weird. Sorry I wander off topic so much, but one of our major problems revolves around a dishonest, horribly inaccurate, irresponsible, and corrupt mainstream media, which happens to belong to or supports a specific political party. And it's not going to get any better until more people figure that out. It's common sense, which is why there's no end in sight. Stay afraid. I don't know. Just call it how I see it.